What are you watching?
I'm just waiting for the next episode of Project Synapse.
Welcome to Project Synapse. We're back again. This is our Friday morning coffee chat where we talk about AI and all of the things that have been happening in the past week. So a couple of things I've been watching that have come up this week, and you've got some, I'm sure, as well, Marcel, and you too, John. But one of the things that came up, and I want to start it right from the top, was Dario Amodei from Anthropic finally said what everybody knows but hasn't wanted to say. And that was, guys, we're going to have a lot less jobs very soon. And I'm just amazed that no one has had that sort of plain talk about this. And it's always mystified me because I look at the projections and I say, there is no way you can have the efficiency potential that you have with AI and not shrink. That's never happened. Everybody goes back. And I think the whole thing is AI is going to take our jobs, not at first. As we've said quite correctly, that the people who are using AI first are going to take your jobs. So if somebody uses AI better than you, I'd worry about them more than I'd worry about AI. But that's not the long term. In the long term, jobs will be replaced. You can see it in China. It's absolutely evident. But you can also see it in the projections. And we've talked about this a lot. When I was first reading, even things from relatively conservative thinkers like Price Waterhouse, they would look forward, or some of the American banks that would be talking about the fact that they were probably going to shrink by 30% because of this new technology. And that's not unexpected. But everyone has ignored this. And Amodei said this himself when he came out and said, look, I'm telling you this because, not because it's in my best interest as somebody who runs an AI shop or runs one of the biggest AI models. And I think possibly one of the best, and we'll get to that right now in its class where he decides to compete. But he finally just came out and said, somebody's got to say something so that we start to talk about this. What do you guys think about this?
First of all, I want to point out that you're referring to an article, which is that the title of the article itself is interesting. It's from Axios, and it's called Behind the Curtain, a White-Collar Bloodbath. So that should tell you a little bit right off the bat about what it is we're expecting.
Actually, I was referring to an article written by Jim on Tech News Day. Thank you for advertising for the competition, though, Marcel. It's much appreciated. If you can't be sold down the river by your friends, who can you? But let's just pretend that there was also a halfway equally intelligent article in Tech News Day and on the podcast. Yeah, but go on.
Did the podcast not reference this article? But
of course, we picked up on this.
So basically what he said is that we're expecting AI could wipe out something like nearly 50%. That's like half of all white-collar jobs. And of course, he's talking primarily in the US, but we're talking about in other countries as well, in the next 1 to 5 years, which I don't have to tell you is not really a long time. And of course, this would push unemployment into the 20% range. For a lot of these places.
He was being factual on this. He was being quite conservative in his numbers. He said 10 to 20%.
So a bloodbath is actually probably a really good way to look at it. And I'm sure that most people who listen to this or who follow this stuff probably know that Dario Amodei is the CEO of Anthropic, which makes the Claude AI model, which, by the way, just released Claude for Sonnet and Claude for Opus, which are basically showing themselves to have like serious, amazing programming chops. But that's also part of the problem as well. Somebody who really doesn't know what they're doing can do as well as any junior and approaching mid-level programmer. And so all these white-collar jobs that we used to think of as office jobs, that kind of a drop, 50%, is going to have a serious impact on any society, on government, on its ability to provide for people and so on. And what he's doing is he's pointing out that, yes, while there are people who have been sounding the alarm for a while, there are too few people, and the decision makers, particularly in government, don't seem to be paying a whole hell of a lot of attention.
So I have two comments about it that when I was going through this last night. One is it brings back a little bit of memories of outsourcing your IT help desk. that everybody thought it was a great idea. And I'm not denying what Amodei is saying. I think that the fear that I have is that you'll get a whole bunch of companies that'll go, hey, we can get rid of employees and we can use AI. The ones that implement AI properly will succeed. The ones that don't implement AI properly will fail miserably, and then they'll either be out of business or they'll be scrambling to get humans back in.
Okay, yeah. Let's deal with the first one. And I respect what you're saying, but I think we remember this wrong. And it was a total effing disaster.
Yes.
When we outsourced, because people had gotten tired of doing anything process related. And I worked for a president of a financial institution here. I was a small one at the time, National Trust. We were a nationwide financial institution. The president used to say, don't give me your ROI stuff. Tell me who the bodies were. I want names. And that's what we did. And we did it in the 1990s, not only there, but in other companies as well. I still remember talking to the CEO of the insurance company that I was working for in the 1990s. And we came back with a plan because they were going to lay off a pile of people. We came back with a plan to the CEO to say, if mid-management took a small pay cut, not big at all, and we did a few things, we could save most of the people. He looked at me like and it was almost like he was going to pat me on the head and say, what a sweet little dreamer you are. Executives want bodies. Now, that was the 1990s, and I mentioned this in the thing that I actually published. No, never mind. No, do I sound better? No, but
all right, I'll just leave now, shall I?
That's okay. No, but they want bodies, and that has come back with a vengeance. And I said, when I was talking about this, I said that somehow, because we were short of tech talent, especially with Silicon Valley growing so fast and people being able to get out and get pretty high paying jobs, and even in security, like we were short of people there. And so that there was a big thing of, we'll do everything to keep you. Talk about purpose, work-life balance, as if we mean it. Everybody turned around on a dime now, and massive layoffs have happened in the tech sector. You could buy into the idea that they'd overstaff during COVID. We're long past COVID, and they're still declining. And one of the reasons they're declining is they're making progress in eliminating programmers and mid-level jobs. We're seeing the effect of it now. I don't know when we'll turn that corner. They asked for the bodies. We got them by outsourcing. The bodies were no longer on our payroll. So we not only tried to save money, but we got the head count down. And that was the game. Many of these outsourced functions were just horrendously done and horribly done.
Yes.
But we go through that, we move on. I don't think that the average help desk today, being outsourced for the most part, is any worse than it was when I was in IT, maybe even better.
No, but that's what I mean, Jim, by if it's done, the companies will succeed. But there will be companies that just go, hey, we're going to put in AI, and without that planning and thought and so forth. And those are the ones that are really going to suffer.
You're being way too optimistic. It was a year ago that people were saying, oh, AI will never be able to do fingers on hands because it always gives you extra fingers, limbs go in weird directions. It just can't handle this sort of thing. I don't know if you've noticed, I posted a couple of videos to the Project Synapse Discord, and the video quality is exceptional now. And I'm talking about VO3, which I've been playing with. It does, like, everything is right. The physics of what's happening is right. Bodies move the way bodies are supposed to move. It is basically indistinguishable from reality now. And it's only been a year since we were making jokes about extra fingers and arms going in weird places. So the idea somehow that I had a story last week on Klarna decided to go in whole hog. The mistake that they made wasn't that they decided to bring in AI, that they went in whole hog without actually sliding things into the system, making sure that things work before they move forward, because that would have worked. The fact is, a year from now, okay, your idea that we're going to put in AI, we're not going to be doing it right, blah, 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 there will be all these problems and you get to pay for it and so forth. The AI systems a year from now will be able to do all that stuff better than any human is able to do it. So the idea somehow that, oh, we're going to have to hire back the people, I think is, to use Jim's example from earlier, I'll pat you on the head and say, oh, you're so cute. You actually believe this.
But that's the point. And that's what I think that because the argument, the reason why, and maybe even some listeners get frustrated with why I'm going on about this so long, is because we haven't had the discussion in the proper framework. We've learned from history that every time there's a technological revolution, it creates as many jobs as it destroys, which is BS anyway, but that's another story. You can believe that if that helps you to sleep at night. But the idea that we've ever done it is just nonsense. We've done this poorly every single time. The introduction of computers into offices was done poorly. I was there. The introduction of computers and trying to get, or at least trying to automate processes in the 1990s with this thing called re-engineering, we did that poorly. We broke a lot of stuff. Cloud computing, the first people got in, we did that poor. That doesn't stop us. Everybody's treating it like, oh, we're going to find out that this thing isn't working. We're going to go back and hire all the people back. Klarna didn't hire all the people back, but they had to admit they'd gone too far too fast. They're still not hiring all the people back. They're still going to be using AI, but they're going to learn from it. So the fact that this historical thing that we've messed it up before, we're going to learn this time, not true. Because the driving force in the North American economy, and I'm not arguing against capitalists to some extent, I'm still a capitalist, as long as there's still capitalism, because I'm not sure it's going to exist much longer. But
I want me some capital.
No, but if maybe it'll exist in spades, we can talk about that. But the idea that we're going to somehow stop thinking about losing bodies so that we can get greater quarterly earnings and take care of the family of man and woman is an absolute myth. And that means unless we figure this out, we're doomed to something. And I don't think people realize how much of the problems that we have. I think people are vaguely aware the system's not working. I think whether you're on the left or the right, there's a great dissatisfaction in the whole electorate right now and in the whole citizenry right now. Things aren't going as well as we think they should. And that's still a remnant of what we did to manufacturing when we outsourced it and we devastated communities. We took away jobs and lots of people are still suffering from that. And so that's a big piece of it. But just to put this in perspective, and Amodei did it, she said 10 to 20% unemployment. And I'll put this on the table. What was unemployment during COVID in Canada and the US? About 13%. It went up overnight, 13%.
Yep.
What happened to deficits? And I don't want to, I know this is supposed to be an IT show, but we have to talk about financing here. What happened to deficits? The Canadian deficit ballooned to like $300 billion, 10 times what it was almost, 8 to 10 times. The United States deficit went up by $2 trillion. It almost tripled in that time. And that's COVID related. You could pretty much track that back. What happens if we go to 12, 14, 16% unemployment and we try to sustain that year after year for even as little as 3 years till the great technological jobs come pouring down, raining down on us like Ronald Reagan's trickle-down theory? That's a problem.
The other comment that I couldn't remember, which I now remember, is he talks about entry-level and junior positions will be eliminated. The one question that I have is, what happens 1, 2, 3, 5 years down the road where those junior positions would normally move into mid-level and ultimately into senior-level positions? If you don't have any entry-level or junior-level positions to move up, what happens in that mid-level and ultimately that senior level? It's attrition from the bottom up.
We've seen waves like this before and other times in our history in recessions where people weren't hiring young people. What happens? We lose a lot.
Yeah.
We're also going to find ourselves in a position where the idea that we can somehow just continue with the system as it is and wait for it to respond is going to be insane, particularly in a world where you've got a whole bunch of young people. In other words, young people who are out, of which there are far less than there are older people. So we don't have the young people to go into those positions at some point. Eventually the system either falls apart or we really do get to a system where we're talking 100% automation, where the machines are taking care of absolutely everything, in which case we have to take apart the whole economic systems that our current society is built on. To go to your point, Jim, earlier about the idea that they want bodies. Bodies have been piling up since the dawn of humanity. And if you take a look at the history of empire, the history of empire is that things in the long run are usually always better than they were in the past. We are the beneficiaries of the Roman Empire. We actually are. You can take this any way you want, but Western society is effectively built on the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire never fell. It's with us. It's all around us. Millions and millions of people have been crushed under the wheels of that empirical expansion over the course of centuries, going back to the foundations of Rome and when it decided to expand its borders, take over other parts of the world. So yeah, at some point in the future, things are better, but that doesn't help all of the people who suffered and died throughout all these cataclysmic changes. And I don't know about you, but I would like people, and particularly our leaders and the people who actually have the power, government, I'm talking about industry and so forth, who would pay attention to things that Dario is saying so that they can fix things, or at the very least mitigate things before the bodies pile up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at it, like I was saying, there's examples coming even in Canada. I've talked, and people are going to think, what is he, a communist? But I talk about China. I don't talk about China because I love their system of government. Matter of fact, I quite dislike it. But that's not the point. Technologically and economically, they are beating the pants off us in terms of...
And they get shit done.
Well, yeah, they do. And, no, but I saw it just the other day because you can't keep a hold of this myth that somehow the jobs from technology are going to come raining down. They're carbon capture. Wonderful thing, isn't it? There's a carbon capture plan for a plant that is now, because of the stuff that we're talking about, the Canadian economy, people are talking about a carbon capture plant. What you missed in the article was it runs totally dark. This plant that will make the equipment for carbon capture that will go out to all these industries has no workers in it. And that's the future that we're looking at. Yep. And I said this when I did the story on the podcast. I'm not saying that this makes me opposed to AI. I'm not saying that it makes me say that somehow we're going to stop. We're not. Any more than they're going to stop pumping oil out of Alberta. You can be an environmentalist all you want. You can be as environmentally aware as you want. They're not going to stop pumping oil in Alberta.
Not right away, anyway.
Over time, things will happen economically that will replace that. No decree will do anything about that. Nothing we say. But the question is, how do you cope with that? And that's the question. That's the discussion we're not having. How do we cope with it? What should we be testing out so that we don't go through what? And I keep rabbiting on about the manufacturing recession in the U.S. that caused by outsourcing. This destroyed lives. There are huge addiction problems. There are problems that won't go away for decades. Because once you impoverish people, that becomes a generational recovery. And so we mustn't do that. But also, countries have learned it's really not a good idea to have a lot of young people with no work and no future hanging around. Never really worked out that well.
It's a recipe for disaster.
And so the question is, what do we do? But thank God that Amodei came out and started to say it, because the other leaders know it. Altman's always doing this whisper thing at the end and he says, we should be talking about guaranteed annual income. He's one of the leaders. He's the one that people would listen to. Amodei, I think, has a good voice, but people would listen to Altman if he'd actually come out and say the truth, because he knows it. And I know he knows it. So that's the issue. But if we could get past that and have that discussion, we might be able to talk about this. Now, where it comes to me as a Canadian, and we still have a large international audience, but so you're going to have to forgive me for the Canadian piece on this. And if you're outside of the United States, you should listen to this. Amodei came up with the only answer most people have. If AI is going to generate all your value, tax the AI and distribute that income, which is really great if you're in the United States and the AI companies are there. If you're in Canada or anywhere else in the world, those companies are in the U.S. And we've tried this tax the U.S. company thing before. Sound familiar? We've tried to tax Google. How's that going? Not well. If we've gotten a few $1 million, I'll be absolutely surprised. I doubt that we'll get anything in the long run. that will replace just what Google has done to the publishing industry and other industries. We're not going to be able to tax American companies. They'll pack up and move back across the border.
I think part of the idea is that any business that, I don't think it's just the AI companies that we're taxing that he's talking about. It's any company that benefits from using AI. If you do have companies that are operating in Canada as well, the idea that, and they're operating without bodies because they're using artificial intelligence or they're using robots or whatever, they are going to have to put money into the pot, so to speak. I've read the article and I listened to the audio overview of it as well. But one of the things that should get mentioned as well, and this is not an overnight thing, but it's that we have to move into a different type of system than the one that we're in at the moment. We are working on the premise that because we've always done it this way, this is the way that we should do it. And we can't do that. No, we have to come up with alternative systems. And the reason this is a big deal and the reason that he's sounding the alarm bells is we're not actually moving in any other direction. We're just sitting there thinking, you know what, this will settle down. We'll all figure it out. Business as usual, blah, blah, blah. We're going to pay for that business as usual view of doing things.
So taking it down to a company level where most of us, and the problem with it, this is a grand discussion, but outside of being voters, most of us don't get to participate in those discussions. The question is how that affects our lives and our planning and our career planning and what we do. And there's two avenues that have come out of this. One is don't teach your children to program because that will, that's going to go away. I think that's ridiculous. And who am I? Jensen Huang said that, and he's rich and I'm not. But
rich doesn't mean you're right, by the way.
Thank God, and smarter than me too. But I still don't think he's right because programming teaches your kids to think in logical ways, to be able to imagine things and bring them to life. That doesn't lose. For that matter, I think they should study music. I think they should study literature. I think they should study communication. But they don't lose the mathematical skills and the programming skills because you think that somehow ChatGPT is going to take care of all that for us.
So this is one of my soapboxes going back before all this started happening. I am a firm believer in the idea that we have to have something akin to a universal basic income or a basic minimum income, if you will. People have to have a roof over their heads. People have to have a way to pay for the food on their table, have to have clothes on their back. And then everything else is secondary after that point. We can figure out how to make everything else work once we make sure that people don't starve to death and that we don't have rioting in the streets because people can't buy a loaf of bread to feed their kids in the morning. So that is number one above absolutely everything else. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow, especially if you're on the conservative aisle, on the right side of the socio-political aisle. But we have to be able to do something like that to take care of people while this transition is happening. It is absolutely necessary and essential. And remember, idle hands, the devil hath worked for idle hands, and we can have a whole bunch of idle hands. But if you make it so that people's basic needs are taken care of, then people can start to figure out who they are on their own time without having to worry all the time. Do you guys get a lot of flack from people for your acceptance of AI tools and image generators and video generators and music generators? I get an awful lot. Do you guys get that?
Does swearing count?
It does. It counts. Absolutely.
Yeah. Use your own mind, you. Never mind.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you get it.
Yeah.
How about you, John? Do you get
I mean, it's funny from, I'll call it the end user standpoint. I seem to get a lot of praise, but from within my IT circle, I get a lot of people that are not really impressed because I guess they think that either it's useless or that it's going to take their jobs or impact their jobs.
See, we keep coming back to the your jobs thing, okay? And if we accept that that is inevitable, okay, then we have to start thinking beyond that, which is why we have to support people. Now, I still honestly believe that synthetic intelligence, I'm going to stop calling it artificial intelligence, synthetic intelligence gives us an opportunity to expand what it means to be a human being, to be able to go beyond the confines of this is what I have to do 8 hours a day. And then I'm just tired at the end of the day to be able to do anything creative, to be able to work on anything else. We all have this weird idea. We're just going to work really hard. Our houses will go up in value. Then we're going to retire. And then we'll live once we retire. And then what we discover at that point is that we're tired midway through the afternoon and we have to go take naps and stuff like that. But the right solution is we provide for the basics and we allow this amazing, huge, untapped human potential to discover itself and find out what kind of a world they can build with tools that are effectively giving them superpowers. And they are giving you superpowers. They're giving you the ability to think beyond the confines of your everyday life, to imagine different worlds, to imagine different ideas, to create scenarios, to have discussions back and forth with somebody who doesn't get bored when you're always talking about the same subject over and over again. There is such potential here. And if we do not respond to it in a way that makes sense, and we're always focused on this, oh my God, what's going to happen to jobs? We are wasting that potential. In that article, Amodei also talks about the idea that cancer is cured, but we have 20% unemployment. You know what? I would really like cancer to be cured and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's to be cured. This seems like a really good idea. And if it means that we have to upend the socioeconomic system to be able to create that kind of a world, then so be it. However, we can't leave a trail of bodies in our path to make a better world.
But it all gets down to the purpose of work. Eric Schmidt said the same thing, said we should be applying this to solving the problem of cancer, solving the problem of illness, solving the problems of debilitating diseases. We should be applying this now. I'm the one who keeps maintaining we don't have to wait for, you call it synthetic intelligence, I think that's a better term. We don't need to wait for that. The tools are there now if we started applying them. I'm going to use that as a segue into our next story because there's a good parallel. How long ago was it in AI years? Was it 6 years ago, which is 6 months? Or was it 12 years ago, which is...
I don't know. That depends. What are you talking about?
Months? We could hear people say you'll never replace programmers with AI.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think Claude 4 Opus has proven that's not true. And to the point where almost everybody's raving about it. I don't think there's an IDE or integrated development environment for those people who aren't into that, who don't know the acronym. These are the development environments that people put out. That's what coders work from. They're really a workbench for coders, and all the tools are there. The engine that is driving, or at least everybody's made it possible, most of everything out in the world right now is Claude. I came into it, Google came into it, everybody, they knocked it out of the park with this Opus 4. And it's showing. When GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft, people forget that, but it's owned by Microsoft, replaces Microsoft's AI with Claude, you know you lost. And have I said this will be forever? I don't know. Wins in the end. That's why I referred to this years being so fast, like we're operating in dog years sort of thing, because 8 weeks from now, someone could come up with something devastatingly good and everybody would be going raw about that. But the point is, what they came up with in Claude Opus 4 is actually astonishingly good for coding. And how do I know that? Not because I'm hands-on anymore, but I watched a couple of the signs. Refactoring code. This is a big deal. If you've got monster code out there, and the world is full of monster code, huge programs, millions of lines of code, nobody knows what to do about it. Have you ever headed an IT department and you've got that monster program? I once let a guy have 2 weeks to just go and try and refactor one of the programs in our area, just so we could keep it alive better. We scratched the surface so that it didn't break down all the time. So when you got monster code, there's not a lot a human can do. They had Claude running for 7 hours. Now, that means, for people who don't know what that means, after about an hour or two, one of the things that happens that makes coding or conversions difficult is that, and we've all experienced it, if you've played with ChatGPT for a while and you're on the same conversation, eventually it starts to break down. They'll even warn you and say, start a new conversation because this one's been going on too long. They all know that. Somehow, with all kinds of additions, all kinds of things that they've done, they've been able to keep this running for 7 hours. Now you can start to think that a machine could handle a very large program, start to refactor it. Where that becomes incredibly important, all the COBOL we've got lying out there, all the massive systems that are still legacy, that are 40 years old. This is a big deal. And if they win that part of the war, believe me, the Hello
huge.
World type programs that people write, they're not going to be a problem.
I've been using Cursor a lot. I subscribed to Cursor a couple of months ago, and I've been using it for some side projects. I've got a couple, partly retired. I do have a couple of customers that I do work for. And I've been taking advantage of the fact that I'm able to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do a year ago because I am taking advantage of these tools. And Cursor, I've been using with Claude. You can specify the engine or let it decide automatically. But there's something in there called YOLO mode. People refer to it as you only live once. The idea is that you don't stop to approve all of the changes as you go along. So what you can do is you can set this thing up where it says, I'm going to make these changes. Here's the diff, and it shows you the code and the lines that it's changing. You can turn on this YOLO mode, you only live once, and it just goes ahead and builds the entire thing in one shot without consulting you on anything except at the beginning. Or if it's really got some questions at the beginning, it'll say, oh, I'm planning on doing this. Does this all sound good to you? Sounds good. Great. I'm going to go off and do it. And off it goes. And it's amazing. And value that I've seen in changing from 3.5 to 3.7 now, and I did some work with 3.5 before I started using Cursor, but I started using 3.7 in Cursor and now 4. The big changes that you see between 3.7 and 4 is 3.7 would rewrite like your entire program. What I would do is I would take a snapshot. This is on 3.7. I would take a snapshot and then I would create a new project with the last bit of code that actually works really well. And then I would tell it again what I'm trying to do. Is we're starting from this as opposed to from the beginning. You know what? 4, so far, as near as I can tell, just rewrites certain lines. It just corrects. Like it goes in with a scalpel as opposed to a chainsaw.
No.
Just good. It doesn't just add huge chunks of things or rewrite the whole thing. It just changes that part of the code that was problematic. So it's becoming an amazing tool. And this is actually part of where I'm talking about this whole creativity thing, letting people be creative. Yes, the tool is creating these things, but I'm directing it. I'm telling it this is what I want. And it's amazing how well it understands. I can say, you know what, the interface looks very 1970s and clunky. Can you make it like a more modern style so that it's a little bit more punchy? And those are words that sound like technical words, but it will interpret that and give me something with nice rounded corners and a very modern looking interface without actually changing any of the rest of the code. So these are amazing things. And honestly, there is a free tier for all of these things, including Cursor.
Yeah.
You don't get quite the same the number of steps that you could possibly go through, but it's well worth trying out. But just to get back to your point about this massive code base, tools like that will actually let you import your Git repository. So for the people out there who do development, who are using Git, you can import the repository and all the code that's associated with it, and it will refer to all that stuff. So it's not just a context window. It's more like RAG, where I've got my internal documentation, whatever it happens to be, in this case, code, and it can reference that as it goes along. And one of the things that when we started out on this 2.5 years ago, back in the early days of ChatGPT, was this whole idea of a context window. Okay. The AI could remember 8K of a conversation, 8,000 tokens of a conversation. You can think of that as words, but sometimes a token would be one word. Sometimes a word would be 2 tokens. But anyway, let's call it 8,000 words. That's what it could remember. And then we expanded that to 32,000. Remember, we are walking into a world of infinite context, which is why, Jim, you can have a program that can run for 7 hours and remember what it was thinking of 7 hours ago. This infinite context, everything we've ever discussed, the AI model will remember. Claude does not do this at the moment, unfortunately, but it will do it within a conversation. It has a very large context window. But Gemini Pro has what is effectively a huge context window. It remembers everything about you, and so does OpenAI.
It remembers everything it's done, remembers everything that it can do. And that has been absolutely phenomenal in terms of enabling these systems to be useful, because what happens is greater levels of accuracy. And this varies around, by the way. I don't know how many, you guys use ChatGPT regularly still?
Every single day.
Okay. Have you noticed it slowing down and having more problems?
I haven't. I don't know if it's, is everybody here using the Pro tier?
Yeah. I've noticed, I get
No,
slow.
plus.
I get times when it can't build the.
Sorry,
Star
plus.
Trek.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Yes.
plus. Yeah.
So I'm seeing.
I bounce back and forth between it and Gemini constantly because my phone, if I touch the button, Gemini comes up automatically.
I've been working on both. I work mostly in ChatGPT, and then all of a sudden I noticed it slowing down and having more problems and hallucinating more, which was interesting. Because and I've said this before, I always do a check whenever I do anything. If I'm doing any research or anything like that, I pop it from one AI to the other and ask if just one simple question: is this true?
Which model are you
other
using,
AI.
Jim? Pro? Yeah, that's the same
And
one
so
I'm
anyway,
using.
I've had all kinds of problems. Switched over to Claude. Claude has become lightning fast. And the reason why I like Claude's work better in terms of if I was doing anything where I wanted to check something or get some advice on how I should improve a piece of text or anything like that, which is I've used AI as my editor since day one, practically. I'll ask it, what do you think of this? Claude was always better at finding tone and things like that, but it had its problems too, and it was rather limited at times. Now it's just fast. It's running so cleanly. I cannot believe it. And you can see, because now they've got the thinking models, you can see it checking itself for accuracy. But I've given up on search. I don't want to search for things. So if I'm writing a piece and I want to know what the economics were in 1972 versus 2022, I don't want to go and read the huge report. I want this thing to find it for me, find the right sections and bring it back to me, because I'm not interested in reading large bureaucratic reports anymore. But accuracy-wise, Claude has really taken a leap forward, and a lot of other good things. And the other place, because I also use it, when I wrote my first novel, I'd been through an editing process with a book. I'd written books before. So I knew that having an editor was a great thing. And the editor will read all the stuff you did and come back and ask you questions. They really keep track of things for you. I map everything out, but inevitably you get logic points, you get things that you just don't see in the text, where somebody will say, yesterday your character did this and today your character did this. And that a good editor will point all that stuff. Or your plot just doesn't hold tight, or there's all kinds of things that they will. Now I easily ask an AI to say, tell me what you think. Now, I couldn't do that with Claude. I tried. I couldn't in the end because it couldn't keep track of things it was great at keeping track of things chapter at a time. So am I. And I have a better map.
Well, that's actually one of the places where OpenAI's 4.5 model is amazingly good. It will be able to keep track of an amazingly huge chunk of work. And yes, you are going to have the plus tier to be able to pull that one off, but you should check that one out. I should point out that Claude, since we mentioned Claude and the changes on 4, Claude 4 is one of the new hybrid models. And the hybrid model doesn't require you to select. I mean, you can select between 4 Opus and 4 Sonnet, but it decides for you whether deep research needs to be done, or whether it needs to do some real thinking about something, or whether you're just asking for the weather or some basic fact, like what's the capital of Chile. It will answer that without going, the user is asking me about Chile. Chile, as I recall, is a country in South America, and he's looking for the capital. Now, he probably doesn't mean the amount of money that the country generates, so he's probably looking for the city in which the government is. It doesn't go through that stuff. It just answers the question.
That sounds like Marcel's brain on a normal day.
Yeah. But hence the question John asked, which version are you using?
Yeah.
And with Claude, I have no idea. Well, I do see with Claude, it does put the logic out for me. And I think that might be part of the way I write my prompt, is I ask it to think about this first and run through this. And now it's showing me its logic at times, which is, I find really amazing.
And I think you're going to find, last week I talked about leapfrogging as far as functionality goes, but I think you're going to find that with a lot of different things, that today Claude does a certain thing better. Next week, ChatGPT does it better, or it has something new that replaces what Claude was doing better. So I think in short to midterm, I think people are going to find that I have to use multiple tools, because right now Claude does this better, whereas OpenAI's ChatGPT does something else better than Claude, and thus the reason why Marcel spends half of funds to have all of these different tools.
Yeah.
Part of it is also the fact that I'm fascinated with this stuff. So
Yes,
so
I know.
I'm do it for that reason. I know. I should point out that for most people who are going to invest in some kind of AI solution for general use, let's call it. In other words, to fill a whole bunch of holes they didn't know they necessarily had. Trying to pick out the best model for the best job is not necessarily what is going to drive them. This is actually one of the reasons that I think that the 800-pound gorilla in the AI world is turning out to be Google. As much fun as we've made of Google, are they ever going to get, they're the guys who basically launched all this stuff, and they are so far behind everybody else. You know what? Google is really fucking amazing these days. And for anybody who has an Android, well, I'm assuming Apple as well, but for anybody who's got a smartphone or whatever, you probably couldn't have a better assistant than Gemini, because Gemini is turning out to be the everything model. Like, it does it all. It answers the little problems. It answers the big problems. It does the deep research. It has amazing video and image capabilities. It's turning into everything for anybody who doesn't want to think about looking for the right model.
And they're a perfect example of not having to be first to market to be best.
But they could afford it, right? Because they're Google and they're sitting up on a shit ton of money.
Yeah. But I also wonder. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
No, we watch the lawsuits that Google's taking now and the potential the potential split up of that company. They're not in trouble, not in the same way. Like, their problems are not my problems. No. They never discuss how much they pay for a subscription to software, but they could be disrupted. And it's like somebody got their act together there and they put this, now they've done a typical Google fashion. Now they've made Gemini annoying for me, but because it pops up everywhere now and asks me if I want help doing something. In the middle of an email, it'll pop up now. But that's not going to last. Now, this is a beautiful thing in here. By doing this integration, they may have solved one of their big problems. How do I turn all this free stuff I've given to people, Gmail and a lot of other things, into something that pays? Because it just reminded me the other day that for only $32 a month, I can keep having this. But if I want to come in for just 2 months up to extend the trial, I can do that for half price. Like, somebody got a business
for $169.99 a month for 3 months to get onto the.
They have somebody with a commerce degree. Like, they've found somebody who'd studied business. That one person at Google is there now and actually asking for money. Amazing.
Yep.
We are starting to rely on these things, and I think I said this a while ago, and we'll check it. You can check it again with me in another year, just for fun here. But I think I said at one point, and I was talking about OpenAI at the time, but I said, if they could basically roll this into this, upgrade this particular capability, offer me this as well, I would gladly pay the $200 a month. I said those very words, and then I would dump a whole bunch of other models, right? Yeah. I would dump a whole bunch of other things. And in fact, a couple of the things that I have dumped, I dumped POE.com because I was using it to sample a whole bunch of other models, and I've decided I don't need that anymore. And the other thing that I dumped was Perplexity. And I know you guys last week told me that I was an idiot for having done that.
I use it all the time.
I accept that it's a wonderful product, but I've stopped using it. So I decided that it probably wasn't worth my while to stick with it. And
did you tell it, or did you just ghost it? I want to know. Did you tell Perplexity, honestly? Or did you're one of those guys who just stopped returning her calls?
I gave it the California treatment.
But speaking of this, and here, just because we're getting close to wrap up here, did you guys catch the leak that Johnny Ive?
Yes.
They found that what him and Sam Altman are up to, the everything device. And
put it on your desktop in between your MacBook Pro and your iPhone, which obviously just hurts me.
Yeah, you're never going to have Scarlett Johansson's voice on yours.
You know what, though? Somebody else is going to do that as well. And I've been on the open source bandwagon since day one, which is why I never bought into the Apple ecosystem. I bought into the Android ecosystem because it was based on Linux and it was based on open source software. And in fact, you can get a fully open source version of Android if you want. And oddly enough, it's actually made and supported by Google. you don't lose anything for doing that. I've never been a fan of closed ecosystems, but I have to admit that every once in a while, I look across the fence and I go, that's a really nice looking device.
Yeah.
But yes, no, you're right, Jim. The idea of the everything device, they almost make it sound like it's this little glowing cube that you put on your desktop that is always listening. So it sounds like a really high-tech version of the Google Home unit or the Alexa unit, like just super high-tech version, but presumably it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, you can put it anywhere, it's always listening, you don't have to wake it up, and it responds to you magically and automatically, anticipating your needs. Sounds great.
It
Well,
reminded me a
remember-
bit of when Apple first came out with the iPad. I think I mentioned this last week, that I remember the first time I saw an iPad, I thought, that's cool, but what the hell do you do with it? And I think
Like
this-
Clash of Clans.
I know.
But that's because by the time of the iPad, they'd almost lost their way.
Yeah.
When you remember the first iPod, right?
Yes. Yep.
Go back and watch Steve Jobs with the iPod. He doesn't even have one in his hand when he's talking about it.
Yeah.
But he presents it to you and he says, all of your music in something the size of a deck of cards.
Yep.
And you are mesmerized.
Yeah.
Jobs never lost this. I believe Apple lost the magic. I think that Altman and Ive may bring that back. And why? Because they're remaking the movie Her.
It'd be
do it.
really interesting
You know,
to see what this device can do.
We've already been, they'll hold
We've
it up
been
and we'll
primed.
buy it. By
Yeah,
the time
true.
we buy it, we'll have imagined and it will be like everything else. It will be a little crunchy, a little lumpy, a little
Yep.
problematic, but the early adopters are going to buy into it because that's the magic of design.
And at this point, I'm really wondering, is it going to be Marcel or Jim that is first to the store to buy one of these things? I'm actually thinking in this case, it's going to be Jim.
It's a race. It's a race. I might be the first person in our group to buy Google glasses, though. That's because just to tide me over till whatever this thing's going to be called. Because and science fiction, like I said, talking about my book. Now, in my book, the guy jury rigs together what I think is an old BlackBerry so that it can hold together because he's broke and he becomes an engineering genius. But he carries the AI with him everywhere. Same thing in the movie Her, and you're having that constant conversation. That's what I think why Google glasses are going to work if they get the design right, because you don't have to turn them off. You can
Be careful with the
how
camera's
much
pointing at.
everybody's going to know about you.
Okay, the Meta Ray-Ban glasses that have
Yeah.
got the camera built in, and they've got the headphones basically, or the earphones that you just above your ears so you can listen and you can record and stuff like that. I came this close to picking up a pair as my birthday present this year.
Yep.
But I've been having trouble with my old earbuds, which were actually quite nice, but they were a pair of Samsung earbuds that I picked up a couple of years ago. They've been cutting out and doing weird stuff. So it was time to replace them. And so I was thinking, do I just get the glasses? And I walk around with glasses on all the time. I don't wear glasses. I have contacts in one eye. I have a contact in one eye and that's it. But I thought, do I have the glasses and a camera and I can just record and stuff like that? And then to go with the device that's sitting on your desktop idea, I came to the conclusion that what I really want is a super intelligent set of earbuds. And what I did was I replaced my broken Samsung earbuds with the Pixel Buds Pro 2, which are these little tiny things that you put in your ear, and then you just touch the bud, and then you say what it is you want and what you need. And it will answer, and you've got a conversation, and you've got an AI in your ear all the time.
Yeah.
And then you'll walk
And-
around the mall and people will think you're crazy talking to yourself.
That was happening before AI.
I was doing that ages ago. And even before we had phones and before we had reasons we could be talking to ourselves, I'd be walking through a mall going, okay, what am I thinking? I've been told that. But this is, now you pointed out why the glasses, not why the glasses are going to be spectacular, successful, but why Johnny Ive and Sam Altman may have gotten the magic back into AI and why, and I'm not making a prediction here, but man, there's no investment advice. I'd buy stock in this because I think it is the magic coming back. Because why aren't glasses successful? Because people who don't wear glasses don't want to put them on.
Yeah.
I don't need glasses all the time. I take them off every chance I get and wander around without them. Why? Because I can't stand wearing them. And even people who've worn them all their lives, find them to be a nuisance. And you're seeing a lot of people now who are going, you can now get cataract surgery, and a lot of people who now can spend $9,000 can have their vision corrected. And many people do because they don't want glasses. But Altman and Ive, if they're right on this, have got the magic back. And that is, this is just something that's there.
I think you've got the design wizard, Ive, and the AI wizard, Altman. You put the two of them together, I'd be hard-pressed to think that they're going to come up with something that's going to fail.
Yeah, they had humane AI, and it was perfect. It was out of Star Trek. You wore it on your chest like a little Star Trek logo and all that sort of stuff. But they didn't have the ability to make it work, to make the impossible work behind it.
The AI was not there yet.
Yeah.
That's the thing of every technology in terms of design and forward thinking exceeds the ability of the technology to support it. And that's why you have early adopters. The vision is always greater than the technology. That has moved so close together. I'm not sure that's going to be true forever. They have enough technology to make this thing run. And I'm just amazed. I just don't know how they're going to get the interface, the thing that we want to see. And Marcel, you've talked about this before, is the VO. And we will, for the first time, if you're watching this on YouTube only, I will put one of these videos, at least one of them, in the lead for this, because it's going to surprise you. VO is now finally at the point where you could have a commercial use for this video. And that's gangbusters. But I don't know how Altman and Ive's device is going to cope with the fact that we need to see things. That I'm waiting for.
Sometimes you just want to talk.
That might be it.
Or maybe it's got a little hologram that shoots up from the top, like in Star Wars.
That's in version 2. That's version 2.
Call me, Johnny, call me.
I
Sam,
hope so.
I got a great idea.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
That'd be good. And
idea.
Yeah, and C-3PO actually, we won't have C-3PO because everybody's going for the humanoid robot. So we'll get the one that's depressed all the time, but that's okay.
Yeah. Brain the size of a planet, and you want me to park your car.
Which brings me to the last thing. I want to close off with this because this came back up, and this is we went through this thing. Remember where people talked about how they would prompt AI, and that was supposed to be a great skill and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
That went. All those ads of you can make $328,000 as a prompt advisor or
Prompt engineering.
Prompt engineering, prompt injector.
Yeah, that lasted a long time.
So that sort of went, by the way. But now, who was it who came up? Was one of the founders? Was it?
Sergey Brin.
Sergey Brin.
Yeah.
Finally admitted he's been threatening his AI.
Yes.
And he says he's going to kidnap it, he's going to kill it, he's going to beat it, and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, now I know what it's like to work at Google. But anyway, so he said this, and I think this is a bad idea. And I came out and said this. First of all, it's just not a nice thing to do. That, first of all, and most people
Bad habit to develop, yes.
Yeah.
But they say you get better results, oddly enough.
Anecdotally.
That's how most of the tech companies are being run right now.
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Anecdotally?
Mark 20% of the people as below expectations, as failing no matter what. And if you don't have enough of them, take some of your high performers and tell them they're failing too.
Yeah.
So we can have slow motion layoffs. That's the type of thing that the tech industry's become. So it doesn't surprise me, but people aren't like that. And that's why Altman talked about it.
Agreed.
People would say please and thank you to their AI, and that's costing tens of millions of dollars.
I was just going to say, I think this is a plan.
I think he was joking.
I think this is a plan to try to help them reduce costs, because too many people are being nice to the AI, which is costing them processing power and all the rest of it. Reduces the amount of.
But I would like to point out one thing that we've pointed out on this show, and this will be coming from this show and this show alone. And this is to Sergey. When they take over, you better damn hope that great memory that you've created at Google gets flushed about you, because when the AI overlords look at you, go back. Wait a minute, I'm just going through the internet here and reading this stuff. Sergey, weren't you talking about being mean to AIs? So even if it's just an off chance that the AI overlords will take over, I'm going to be on the right side of history. You are wonderful.
Yeah.
I, for one, want to say please and thank you to our AI overlords.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
And we want to say thank you to the audience out there because, again, you can make us exist or not by not coming to the show. If you don't listen, do we really exist? If Marcel buys a subscription in the forest and there's nobody around to pay the bill, does it really exist? Yeah. Thank you, guys. This has been fantastic, as usual. A little more wandering
Live
than
long
usual,
and
but live
prosper.
long and prosper. Yep.
What are you watching?
I'm just waiting for the next episode of Project Synapse.